Can Ghana's new president, John Mahama, prove to the world, and to the West, that he's not just another placeholder in a long line of leaders playing by someone else's rules? His return to power is not just a political victory. It is a message, a warning, a signal that Africa may finally be ready to step off the sidelines of global affairs and rewrite the script. And this time, the continent is not asking for permission. Mahama's win comes at a pivotal moment, one where the global balance of power is shifting and African nations are waking up to just how much they've been shortchanged. As Western powers, led by the US, tighten their grip through new policies like Trump's heavy import taxes and the controversial mass repatriation of African nationals, Mahama is firing back with something the West rarely expects from African leaders: resistance. In one of his boldest moves yet, President Mahama has called for the removal of all US troops from Ghana, a decision that signals a powerful shift in African foreign policy. For decades, US and other foreign military presences have been portrayed as partnerships, but in reality, they've often been mechanisms of control, surveillance, and influence. Now, Ghana is pulling the plug. But this isn't just about troops, it's about sovereignty. It's about reclaiming control over the continent's land, skies, borders, and future. It's about sending a message that Ghana, and by extension Africa, will no longer be a chessboard for foreign powers. The days of quiet compliance are over. This is a direct response to the kind of economic and political arrogance that has long defined the West's relationship with Africa, including Trump's punitive import taxes that punish African producers, and his administration's push to send African immigrants back to the continent as if they were disposable. Mahama's message: if you're sending Africans home, they're coming back to a continent that's fighting for itself. A continent building systems, not waiting for handouts. A continent that will not be bullied into submission by foreign tariffs or military dependency. John Mahama is not just governing Ghana. He's reigniting the Pan-African fire. His leadership taps into the unfinished legacy of Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana's founding father, who once envisioned a United States of Africa, bold, sovereign, and globally respected. Mahama's vision picks up where that dream left off, and it's resonating across the continent. Today's Africa is not the Africa of yesterday. Across Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and now Ghana, a new wave of leadership is standing up, demanding equity on the world stage and taking real action to dismantle neocolonial structures, economically, militarily, and diplomatically. Ghana under Mahama is poised to become a cornerstone of this new movement, one that challenges the very foundation of the West's influence in Africa. No more puppet regimes. No more foreign troops enforcing stability. No more resource deals that enrich outsiders while draining African soil. The world may not be ready for what comes next, but Africa is, and Ghana is leading the way. John Mahama is charting a bold new course, not just for Ghana, but for all of Africa. A path that puts self-reliance at the center, not survival. One that replaces dependency with dignity, and short-term fixes with long-term transformation. This isn't about keeping Ghana's economy afloat with patchwork policies or IMF band-aids. It's about laying the foundation for a resilient, independent economy, built by Ghanaians for Ghanaians. Mahama's vision is nothing short of a national overhaul. In the next 4 years, his administration has pledged sweeping reforms to rebuild trust in Ghana's political system, revive economic confidence, and unlock the country's true potential as the Black Star of Africa. He understands the deep scars left by corruption, foreign control, and economic mismanagement. But instead of dwelling on the past, he's focusing on building a future worth fighting for. This journey won't be easy, Mahama admits, but it is necessary. Because Ghana cannot afford to lean on foreign crutches any longer. At the heart of his plan is a bold promise: to end reliance on foreign loans and aid. Instead, Mahama is investing in local industries, empowering homegrown businesses, and rebuilding the economic engine from the ground up. His strategy includes boosting domestic food production to ensure national food security and end dependence on costly imports, modernizing infrastructure and expanding access to technology, creating jobs and strengthening Ghana's industrial base, revamping education to empower a new generation of innovators, builders, and problem solvers, tapping into Ghanaian talent, not foreign consultants, to lead the way towards sustainable development. But Mahama's mission doesn't stop at Ghana's borders. His leadership represents a blueprint for Africa itself, a model of what it means to break free from neocolonial shackles and reclaim sovereignty. He is sending a loud, clear message to the West. Africa is no longer your experiment. We are not your aid project. We are partners, or we are nothing. Still, Mahama knows that independence cannot be achieved in isolation. His vision is grounded in unity, not just national, but continental. By strengthening alliances across Africa, Mahama aims to build a united front, capable of resisting foreign manipulation and charting a shared future based on African values, priorities, and strength. The road ahead will be tough. Ghana's economy has been pushed to the edge, burdened by debt, instability, and decades of outside interference. But Mahama is undeterred. He believes that now is the time to rise and lead. This is about more than a political comeback. It's about a new beginning for Ghana, for West Africa, and for the continent as a whole. Under Mahama, Ghana isn't just rebuilding. It's leading a revolution, a peaceful, strategic revolution aimed at restoring Africa's dignity, protecting its wealth, and speaking with a voice that cannot be ignored. The world is watching, and Ghana is ready to prove that the future of Africa will be written, not in Washington or Brussels, but in Accra, Ouagadougou, Bamako, and every African capital bold enough to stand on its own feet. Add your voice to the total liberation of Africa by leaving a comment in the comments section below. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more informative videos like this one. Let's proceed. Building a powerful nation is noble, but building an empire that uplifts and unites an entire continent, that is revolutionary. Under bold leadership, Ghana is no longer just charting its own path forward. It's spearheading a continent-wide movement to dismantle the last vestiges of foreign control and ignite a new era of African unity, pride, and self-determination. And Ghana is not alone. For decades, African nations have fought side by side, united by a common vision: a free, sovereign Africa, no longer dictated to by foreign powers. Today, that dream is rapidly evolving from rhetoric into action. Ghana, alongside countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, is taking real, irreversible steps to reclaim the continent's future. John Mahama's leadership marks a historic turning point. His message is clear: Africa will no longer outsource its destiny. The time has come to stop looking outward for validation, security, or economic survival, and to start building our strength from within together. At the heart of this movement is a powerful shift in African consciousness, away from dependency and towards solidarity. No more will African nations serve as tools in someone else's geopolitical game. No more will they accept military installations on their soil under the guise of stability. No more will they bow to financial systems designed to keep them indebted and under control. One of the most powerful statements yet came from Ghana's bold decision to shut down US military installations within its borders. For years, these bases were portrayed as safeguards against terrorism. In truth, they were tools of surveillance, influence, and soft occupation. By saying no more, Ghana sent a thunderous message, not just to Washington, but to every foreign power that has treated Africa like a resource to be mined and a threat to be managed. This wasn't a rushed decision. It was deliberate, calculated, and deeply symbolic. It said, Africa is not your backyard. We are not your project. We are sovereign. This action mirrors similar moves in Burkina Faso and Mali, where leaders have rejected the illusion of military partnerships that only serve outside interests. This is a continental awakening. A growing number of nations are rejecting the neocolonial systems that have shackled Africa for decades, from the CFA franc to exploitative trade deals to one-sided military arrangements. They're demanding a new order, one led by Africans for Africans. Ghana, once seen as a stable but quiet actor on the continental stage, is now stepping up as a leader in a broader rebellion. Mahama is not just governing, he is guiding a political and ideological revolution. He envisions a network of cooperation across Africa, sovereign nations working together to build regional security structures, economic resilience, and technological innovation, without begging for help, permission, or funding from the very forces that exploited them. This isn't nationalism, it's Pan-Africanism reborn. And the movement is gaining ground. In Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, you see the same fire. A determination to protect African interests, empower African people, and build African-led solutions without the shadow of foreign oversight. The question the world now faces is simple. Are they ready for an Africa that no longer asks, but decides? This resistance is not about isolation. It's about self-respect. It's not about cutting ties. It's about choosing partners, not masters. Africa is not turning its back on the world. It's demanding to engage with the world as an equal. So what's next? If this momentum continues, we could witness the birth of a continent-wide security and development framework led entirely by Africans. No foreign bases, no IMF strings, no hidden clauses. Just sovereign cooperation rooted in shared history, shared struggle, and shared destiny. The journey will be difficult. The enemies of African unity are powerful, deeply entrenched, and unwilling to surrender their influence without a fight. But the spirit of today's Africa is different. It is bolder, unapologetic, awake. Ghana's stance is not just policy, it is prophecy. A signal that the age of foreign control is ending. Africa is no longer waiting for change. It is the change. And from Accra to Ouagadougou, from Bamako to Niamey, a new chapter is being written. By Africans, for Africans. This is the dawn of a sovereign Africa. One built on strength, solidarity, and self-determination. The world should take notice. For decades, the world has been told a lie. A lie that Africa is weak, that it is poor, that it is chaotic. But that lie was never about Africa. It was about control. A convenient narrative spun by foreign powers to justify centuries of exploitation, theft, and domination. Today, that narrative is collapsing. Africa is standing at a historic crossroads, rejecting the labels imposed by others and asserting itself as a continent rich in resources, culture, talent, and unshakable potential. The winds of change are blowing across the land, and at their helm is a new generation of African leaders who refuse to be footnotes in someone else's story. No more dependency, no more submission, no more silence. This is not just a political moment, it's a continental awakening. Across Africa, a bold resistance is taking shape. Not with weapons, but with policies. Not with violence, but with vision. Not with permission, but with power. In countries like Ghana, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, leaders are taking historic steps to undo the neocolonial chains that have long bound the continent. They are rejecting exploitative military arrangements, dismantling rigged economic systems, and confronting the institutions that have drained African wealth while offering nothing but debt in return. Take Ghana, a nation often hailed as a symbol of democratic stability. Under the leadership of President John Mahama, Ghana is not just governing, it's leading a rebellion. A rebellion against foreign military dominance. A rebellion against unfair trade agreements. A rebellion against the centuries-old belief that Africa must wait for help, instead of building its own future. The fight is no longer hidden, it's in the open. Leaders are calling for the closure of foreign military bases, symbols of control disguised as partnerships. From Ghana to Mali, the message is resounding. Africa will secure itself, defend itself, and speak for itself. This is not anti-Western. This is pro-African. Even nations often overlooked in global conversations, like Cape Verde, are caught in the struggle. Strategic islands, untapped coastlines, and resource-rich lands have long been quietly occupied or manipulated under the radar. But now, that too is changing. Africans are asking hard questions. Who controls our land? Who benefits from our resources? And at what cost? The reckoning has begun. Nowhere is this clearer than in the rejection of the CFA franc, a colonial relic controlled by France that has kept 14 African nations tethered to foreign control. In countries like Burkina Faso, under leaders like Ibrahim Traoré, and in Mali, with voices like Assimi Goïta, resistance is no longer whispered. It is declared, loudly, proudly. This is the rebirth of Pan-Africanism. Not as an idea, but as a movement, a mission, a continental blueprint for sovereignty. These leaders aren't looking to isolate Africa. On the contrary, they are calling for fairness, equity, and justice in global affairs. Africa is no longer content with being the world's charity case or raw materials supplier. It demands partnership, not patronage. For far too long, Africa has been the world's dumping ground, looted of gold, oil, diamonds, cobalt, and rare earth minerals. Its people have been exploited, its governments infiltrated, and its cultures disrespected. But the tide is turning. Africa is not dependent. The world is. Without Africa's resources, the global tech industry grinds to a halt. Without Africa's agricultural potential, food security becomes a myth. Without Africa's people, the future workforce of the world collapses. Africa holds the keys to the next industrial revolution. And finally, it is beginning to realize its own worth. This is not just a political realignment. This is a generational shift. Young Africans are rising with a new consciousness. They are rejecting the inferiority complex of the past and embracing their role as architects of the future. They are demanding education that empowers, systems that serve, and leadership that puts African interests first. The world is shifting toward multipolarity, a balance of power where no single region dictates the terms. And Africa is not just joining that world, it is reshaping it. For centuries, the West wrote the rules. Africa was forced to play along. But now, Africa is rewriting the script. With new alliances, with homegrown economies, with pride, with purpose, with power. This is not a plea. This is a declaration. Africa will no longer ask to be seen. It will make itself impossible to ignore. The question is no longer, can Africa rise? The question is the world ready for an Africa that leads? Because make no mistake, that Africa is already here. And it is not waiting. The pressing question before Western powers today is this: will they acknowledge Africa's rightful place as an equal stakeholder in global affairs? Or will they cling to outdated, exploitative systems designed to maintain control? For African nations, the path forward is clear. The era of dependency and subservience is over. Africa is rising, proud, self-assured, and determined to chart its own course. This is not an appeal for acceptance. It is a bold declaration of autonomy. The next decade will not be a replay of the last. Africa is actively reshaping its narrative, forging a future built on sovereignty, innovation, and internal strength. The continent is no longer waiting to be noticed. The world is now compelled to pay attention. Long viewed primarily as a source of raw materials, Africa's true value lies far beyond its natural wealth. It is a continent rich in intellectual capital, home to the world's youngest population, and bursting with untapped potential. With the average age below 20, a new generation of Africans is stepping forward, educated, connected, and ambitious. This generation isn't content with consuming foreign products or following global trends. They are setting new ones, launching startups, driving technological innovation, producing world-class art, and demanding a seat at every table. Africa is moving beyond the outdated model of exporting raw goods and importing finished products. It is becoming a hub for advanced industries, digital economies, and high-value enterprise. This transition isn't just a regional phenomenon, it's a geopolitical game-changer. For centuries, Western dominance relied on exploiting Africa's divisions and extracting its resources while suppressing its unity and development. But that strategy is crumbling. African nations are increasingly looking past old rivalries, choosing instead to collaborate for shared prosperity. Continental bodies like the African Union and ECOWAS are evolving into more cohesive and strategic alliances. Together, they are forging a unified front capable of demanding fair trade, controlling their own security, and setting the terms of global engagement. The world's major powers have taken notice. Countries like China and Russia are deepening their investments and diplomatic ties, aiming to secure strategic and economic footholds across Africa. China, in particular, has made significant inroads in the Horn of Africa, a region critical to international trade routes. Russia, too, is expanding its influence, forming security partnerships and offering alternatives to Western military cooperation. This growing interest is sparking alarm in Western capitals, especially Washington. Africa's critical role in the global supply chain, particularly in the sourcing of rare earth elements and strategic minerals used in high-tech and defense industries, makes it central to the world's future. With China securing a dominant share of these resources, US lawmakers are scrambling to respond, proposing legislation like the Russia Act to reduce dependency on adversarial supply chains. Yet Africa's new posture is not about shifting dependency from one global power to another. It is about ownership of its land, its resources, its voice. It is about ensuring that foreign partnerships serve African interests first. The continent is no longer a passive stage for global powers to compete over. It is becoming an active and assertive player, shaping outcomes on its own terms. In a defining moment for this continental awakening, Ghana has taken a bold step by ordering the shutdown of US military bases within its borders. For years, these installations were justified under the guise of counterterrorism and regional security. But to many Africans, they symbolized foreign control and a deeper neo-colonial agenda. Ghana's decision is not just political, it is symbolic. It signals an end to silent compliance and a renewed demand for sovereignty. This act of reclaiming national space speaks to a broader aspiration shared by many African nations: to be the architects of their own security, economy, and identity. It also aligns with a larger global realignment. As power shifts from a unipolar Western-led order to a multipolar world, Africa is no longer on the sidelines. It is at the center of emerging global dynamics, holding cards that the world's biggest economies cannot ignore. The message is unmistakable. Africa will no longer be treated as an afterthought or a pawn in the games of powerful nations. It is a continent awakening to its potential, young, resourceful, united, and bold enough to challenge the legacy of centuries-old domination. This is a new chapter in global history, one where Africa is not asking for recognition, but taking it. The time of waiting is over. Africa has arrived, not as a dependent region, but as a rising force shaping the world to come. This transition marks the end of an era where global power was concentrated in the hands of a few, and the dawn of a new system where regions like Africa have a greater voice and share of influence. Ghana's decisive actions serve as both a challenge and a clarion call to other African nations to reassess their relationships with foreign powers and to prioritize policies that benefit their own citizens first and foremost. This movement is not just about economic independence. It is about crafting a future where African nations are acknowledged for their contributions to the global community, and not merely treated as sources of raw materials or sites for foreign military intervention. Critics from Western nations may brand Ghana's bold decision as destabilizing or reckless. Yet, such criticism misses the crux of the matter. Africa has endured centuries of destabilization due to exploitation and external interference. Leaders like those in Ghana are now showing the world the courage and decisiveness needed to shift this narrative. Their actions demand a complete rethinking of how the world engages with Africa, pushing for a future defined by mutual respect and collaboration rather than the continued legacy of exploitation and subjugation. Ghana's stand could spark a continent-wide movement, a movement that reflects Africa's growing confidence, maturity, and readiness to chart its own course. The central question remains: will Western powers accept this transformation as a natural evolution in Africa's role on the global stage? Or will they revert to age-old tactics of control and coercion to undermine these efforts? This moment is not merely a victory for Ghana. It is a triumph for the entire continent. As Africa continues to rise, the prospect of it becoming the global powerhouse it has always been destined to be becomes ever more tangible. Ghana has made the first move, but the question remains: will other African nations follow suit on this march towards sovereignty, equality, and self-determination? Africa stands at a critical crossroads, and the decisions made by its leaders today will shape the continent's role in the global order for years to come. The world must prepare itself for an Africa that no longer asks for permission, but demands and deserves respect. This is more than a political shift. It is the beginning of a new era for a continent poised not just to survive, but to lead, innovate, and inspire. Tell us what you think in the comments section below. We explore the rich history, culture, and the ongoing struggle for sovereignty in Africa. Join us in this important conversation by subscribing to our channel. By subscribing, you're not just staying informed, you're becoming part of a movement dedicated to Africa's rightful place on the global stage. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Let's work together to spread knowledge and inspire change. Thanks for watching.